Months turned into a year, and the distance between Emma and Jack became more than physical. It was emotional and final. Jack signed the divorce papers when they arrived, knowing he had no right to fight her decision. He tried to move on, but every relationship he attempted felt hollow, haunted by the ghosts of his choices. Emma, meanwhile, thrived in her independence. She returned to painting, an old passion she had abandoned, and found solace in expressing her emotions on canvas. Her work caught the eye of a local gallery owner, and soon her art was on display. With every brushstroke, she felt herself growing stronger, more whole. One evening at her first solo exhibition, Emma caught the eye of a kind man named Lucas. Unlike Jack, Lucas's attention was steady and genuine, unclouded by deceit. They spent hours talking, their laughter filling the gallery. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt the spark of possibility. Jack, hearing of her success through mutual friends, realized Emma had found her path forward, a life without him. The knowledge was bittersweet, but he couldn't begrudge her happiness. She had rebuilt what he had shattered. In time, Emma found love again, this time built on trust and mutual respect. Jack remained a distant memory, a lesson she had carried with her, but no longer allowed to define her. And as Emma walked hand in hand with Lucas through the streets of Paris on a second chance at romance, she knew she had made the right choice. To choose herself, as Emma's relationship with Lucas deepened, she found herself rediscovering the joy of vulnerability and connection. Lucas was patient and attentive, a stark contrast to the emotional distance she'd endured with Jack toward the end of their marriage. He didn't just support her art. He celebrated it, often accompanying her to events and quietly championing her work to others. One day, while they strolled through a quiet park, Lucas paused by a bench overlooking a small lake. The air was crisp, the leaves a tapestry of autumn hues. He took her hands in his and looked into her eyes with an earnestness that made her heart skip a beat. "Emma, I know what you've been through. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise to always be honest, to always put us first. I love you, and if you're ready, I'd like to build something lasting with you." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of hope and healing. For the first time in years, she felt safe, loved, and understood. She nodded, her smile radiant. "I love you too, Lucas, and I'm ready." Meanwhile, Jack had taken steps to rebuild his own life. Therapy had forced him to confront the root of his infidelity and the ways he had failed in his marriage. He volunteered at a local charity and poured his energy into mentoring young professionals, hoping to create something meaningful from his mistakes. Though he still carried regret, he also found a semblance of peace in accepting his flaws and working toward growth. Years later, Emma and Lucas returned to Paris for their honeymoon. As they stood on a bridge overlooking the Seine, Emma tossed a small key into the water, a symbolic gesture of letting go of the past and embracing the life she had rebuilt. Jack, thousands of miles away, watched the sunset from his balcony, reflecting on the lessons he'd learned. Though their stories had diverged, both Emma and Jack had found closure in their own ways. Life, as it often does, moved forward, offering them both the chance to grow and heal in its wake. Emma's honeymoon in Paris felt like a dream come true, a stark contrast to the strained trip she had once shared with Jack. With Lucas, every moment felt natural and sincere. They wandered through Montmartre, shared quiet laughter in quaint cafes, and danced under the glow of the Eiffel Tower. Lucas was everything Jack had failed to be, a partner who prioritized Emma's happiness and met her with unwavering love. Back home, Emma settled into a new chapter of her life with Lucas. They purchased a small home filled with sunlight and memories waiting to be made. Emma continued to thrive in her art career, hosting workshops and inspiring others to find healing through creativity. Lucas, a teacher by profession, often brought his students to her exhibits, fostering an environment where art and education intertwined. Jack, on the other hand, remained single, dedicating himself to self-improvement and mentorship. He often thought about Emma, not with longing, but with a bittersweet gratitude for the lessons their broken marriage had taught him. He found solace in knowing she had moved on and was happy, a happiness he once jeopardized but now supported from afar. One day, Jack came across an article about Emma in a lifestyle magazine. It highlighted her art and journey, including her ability to turn pain into beauty. Seeing her radiant smile in the accompanying photograph, he felt a pang of regret but also pride. She had become everything she deserved to be, strong, accomplished, and fulfilled. Years later, their paths crossed unexpectedly. Emma and Lucas attended a charity gala where Jack was a keynote speaker. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Jack gave her a small, respectful nod. Emma returned it with a kind smile before turning back to Lucas, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. In that moment, Jack understood what closure truly meant. Emma was happy, and so was he, in his own way. Their shared history, though painful, had shaped them both into better versions of themselves. And while they had once been a part of each other's stories, their futures were now separate. And exactly as they should be after the gala, Emma found herself reflecting on that brief encounter with Jack. Seeing him again didn't stir the emotions she feared it might. Instead, it felt like looking at a chapter of her life that was closed, important for who she had become but no longer defining her. Lucas noticed her thoughtful expression as they walked to their car. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Emma smiled, slipping her hand into his. "I am," she said honestly. "Seeing Jack reminded me how far I've come. I used to think that part of my life would haunt me forever, but now it feels distant. I've moved on." Lucas kissed her forehead. "You're incredible, Emma. You turned something painful into strength. That's inspiring." Jack, meanwhile, sat quietly at his table after the event, watching the room buzz with energy. He had noticed Emma's happiness with Lucas and felt an odd sense of peace. For so long, he had carried the guilt of what he had done, wondering if she would ever truly heal. Seeing her now, thriving, was all the answer he needed. The following week, Jack sent Emma a short message. It wasn't an attempt to reconnect, but rather an acknowledgement of the moment they'd shared at the gala. Asterisk Emma, I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. Seeing you at the event reminded me how strong you've always been. I wish you nothing but happiness. Jack, asterisk. Emma read the message and smiled. She showed it to Lucas, who nodded approvingly. "It's closure," he said. She replied simply, asterisk, "Thank you, Jack. I wish you the same." Asterisk. That exchange was the final tie severed between them, leaving only mutual respect and gratitude for the lessons learned. From then on, they both moved forward without looking back. Emma and Lucas continued building their life together, one filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. They welcomed their first child a year later, a baby girl who became the center of their world. Emma often continued. Emma and Jack had been married for 7 years, a relationship that began with spark and passion, but had lately become a rhythm of routine. To rekindle their connection, Emma planned a vacation to Paris, hoping the city of love would remind them why they fell in love in the first place. Their flight to Paris was a red-eye, giving them a chance to relax before embarking on their romantic adventure. Emma, exhausted from planning every detail of the trip, fell asleep shortly after takeoff. Jack, however, couldn't sleep. He leaned back, flipping through the in-flight entertainment options, but soon grew restless. Sitting next to him on the other side of the aisle was a striking woman with a confident air and a mischievous smile. Her name was Vanessa, and she struck up a conversation with Jack about the usual travel topics, destinations, airline, food, and favorite cities. Her laughter was infectious, and Jack found himself drawn in, enjoying the attention in a way he hadn't felt in years. What began as harmless chatter took a turn when Vanessa's hand lingered a little too long on Jack's arm while she laughed at his joke. Emboldened, she leaned in closer, whispering something Jack couldn't resist smiling at. The dimly lit cabin created an illusion of privacy, though Emma was just a seat away, fast asleep under a blanket. Jack knew he was treading dangerous ground, but he didn't stop. Vanessa suggested they stretch their legs, and they wandered toward the back of the plane, where fewer passengers lingered. Their whispers turned to flirtation, and the boundary between innocent and inappropriate blurred. In the tiny galley at the rear of the plane, the tension peaked. Vanessa pressed closer, and Jack didn't pull away. It was a moment of weakness that Jack would later regret deeply. A flight attendant walking past cleared her throat loudly, startling them both back to reality. Jack returned to his seat, guilt gnawing at him. Emma stirred awake and smiled, oblivious to what had just happened. She asked if he was ready for their adventure in Paris, her excitement palpable. Jack forced a smile, vowing silently to bury the mistake and focus on their future. But secrets have a way of surfacing. And for Jack, the turbulence wasn't over. It was only beginning over the next few days in Paris. Jack tried to bury his guilt under a facade of attentiveness. He indulged Emma in everything she wanted. A sunrise walk along the Seine, champagne at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and countless stolen kisses in the city's picturesque corners. But guilt has a way of eroding even the strongest resolve. Emma, while swept up in the magic of Paris, began noticing Jack's uncharacteristic behavior. He seemed distracted at times, his phone never far from his reach. He flinched when she casually rested her head on his shoulder during dinner. The man she had hoped to reconnect with seemed distant, even amidst the most romantic setting in the world. One evening, after a day spent exploring the art at the Louvre, Emma decided to confront Jack. They were having dinner at a charming little bistro, the kind with candlelit tables and live accordion music wafting through the air. "You've been off lately," Emma said, her voice gentle but firm. "Did something happen?" Jack looked up from his plate, startled. "What? No, of course not. I'm just tired, that's all." Emma tilted her head, studying him. "Jack, I know you. Something's bothering you. If we're here to reconnect, I need you to be honest with me." The weight of her words was unbearable. Jack wrestled internally. Should he confess and risk destroying their fragile truce, or continue to conceal the truth? Jack began, but the words caught in his throat. Before he could say more, his phone buzzed on the table. The name on the screen sent a chill down Emma's spine. Vanessa. Emma froze. "Who's Vanessa?" Jack's face drained of color. He reached for the phone, but Emma was quicker, snatching it up. She swiped the screen and opened the message. Vanessa's words were brief but damning. Asterisk, still thinking about that kiss? Let me know if you want to meet up. Asterisk. The room seemed to shrink around them. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the message. Jack, her voice cracked, tears pooling in her eyes. "What is this?" Jack stammered, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "It's not what it looks like," he said weakly, the cliché sounding as hollow as he felt. Emma's composure shattered. "Then tell me what it is, Jack, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you betrayed me." Jack lowered his head, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. "It was a mistake," he said softly. "It didn't mean anything. It was on the plane. I wasn't thinking. I'm so sorry." Emma stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. The other diners turned to look, but she didn't care. "You weren't thinking? We're supposed to be fixing our marriage, Jack. And you..." Her voice broke, and she grabbed her coat. "I can't do this right now. I need some air." Jack tried to follow her, but she held up her hand. "Don't. Just don't." She left the bistro, the Parisian night swallowing her whole. Jack sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. For the first time, he realized that what had happened on the plane wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was a fissure that could shatter everything they had built together. Now, all he could do was hope it wasn't too late to pick up the pieces. Jack spent the night pacing their hotel room, replaying the moment Emma walked away. When she finally returned in the early hours, her face was puffy from crying, her expression resolute. "I needed to think," she said, her voice steady but distant. "And I realized something I deserve better. Better than lies. Better than excuses. Emma, please, Jack pleaded. It was a mistake. I'll do anything to make it right. Just give me a chance. She shook her head, tears threatening again. You already had your chance, Jack. On that plane. And you chose wrong. Emma packed her bags and left that morning, her heart heavy but her resolve firm. As she walked away, Jack realized the truth. His moment of weakness had cost him everything weeks past, and Jack's attempts to contact Emma went unanswered. She had moved back to her parents' house, taking time to heal and reflect. Jack, meanwhile, drowned in regret, replaying their last moments together. One day, Emma sent a single message, *, I'm filing for divorce. Please respect my decision. *, Jack's heart sank, but he knew he had no one to blame but himself. Emma, on the other hand, began rebuilding her life, finding strength in friends, family, and therapy. Though the pain lingered for both of them, Emma eventually realized that leaving Jack was her first step toward rediscovering her worth and a future untethered by betrayal. Thanks for watching. Years passed, and life carried Emma and Jack further into their separate paths. Emma and Lucas grew their family, welcoming another child, a boy, whose boundless curiosity reminded Emma of her own childhood. Their home was filled with love, art, and laughter, a place where the past held no shadow. Emma's art career flourished beyond her dreams. She became a prominent figure in the art world. Her pieces celebrated not only for their beauty, but for the resilience they symbolized. Her workshops inspired countless people to find healing through creativity, and her gallery openings became highly anticipated events. One such opening, years later, drew an unexpected guest, Jack. Emma spotted him from across the room, standing quietly near one of her larger pieces, a vivid depiction of rebirth painted in warm, radiant hues. His presence wasn't unsettling, but rather a surprising testament to how far they had come. As the event wound down, Jack approached her. He looked older, but carried himself with a quiet confidence, a man who had come to terms with his past. Emma, he said softly, offering a small smile. Your work is extraordinary. It's moving. Thank you, Jack, Emma replied, her voice warm but measured. I appreciate you coming. I've followed your career from a distance, he admitted. Seeing all you've achieved, what you've built, it's inspiring. You deserve every bit of it. Emma nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. Thank you, and I hope you found your peace too. Jack hesitated, then nodded. I have. It took a while, but I've learned a lot about myself, about what really matters. They shared a brief, understanding silence before Jack extended his hand. Emma shook it, their handshake a quiet acknowledgement of the past and the people they had become. As Jack left the gallery, Emma turned back to Lucas, who had been chatting with a group of guests. He caught her eye, smiling warmly. She walked over, looping her arm through his, feeling the grounding comfort of his presence. That night, as Emma tucked her children into bed and later sat with Lucas in their cozy living room, she reflected on how life had unfolded. The mistakes, the pain, and the healing had all led her to this, a life she wouldn't trade for anything. Jack's chapter in her story was long closed, but it had been an essential part of the journey. And now, her life was no longer defined by the turbulence of the past, but by the love, joy, and fulfillment she had created in the present. As the years went on, Emma's life continued to evolve. The once lingering shadows of her past with Jack faded into distant memories, replaced by the warmth of her family and the love she shared with Lucas. Her art flourished, becoming a voice of strength and transformation for those who saw it, and she became a mentor to younger artists, guiding them through their own journeys of healing and self-expression. One summer, after the opening of a major exhibition in New York, Emma found herself reflecting on everything she had achieved. She sat on the balcony of their home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Lucas by her side, their children playing in the yard. The feeling of peace was undeniable. She had built a life she was proud of, one filled with love, purpose, and joy. Lucas gently squeezed her hand. "You're amazing, Emma. The way you've turned everything into something beautiful. It's incredible." She smiled at him, her heart full. "It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. I never imagined my life could be this full." Meanwhile, Jack had built a quiet but meaningful life of his own. After years of soul-searching and personal growth, he found contentment in his work and volunteer efforts, helping young people who had made mistakes to turn their lives around. He had become a trusted mentor, someone who could speak from experience. And though he still carried the weight of his past, he had learned to let it fuel positive change in his life. One day, while volunteering at a local youth center, Jack received an invitation. It was from Emma, inviting him to speak at an art therapy event she was hosting. The event was aimed at helping others heal through creative expression, and she thought he might offer valuable insight into the power of change and redemption. At first, Jack hesitated. The idea of facing Emma again, after all these years, stirred up emotions he hadn't expected. But he knew it was a chance to reflect on how far they both had come and to possibly offer something back to the world that had given him a second chance. He accepted. When the day of the event arrived, Jack stood before the crowd, speaking honestly about his past mistakes and the journey he had undertaken to become a better man. He spoke of the lessons he had learned from people like Emma, who had shown him what it meant to heal and forgive. His words were raw and heartfelt, and he could see the impact they had on the audience. Afterward, as the event wrapped up, Jack and Emma found themselves standing in a quiet corner of the room. Time had softened the edges of their past, and while there was no romantic spark between them anymore, there was mutual respect and understanding. "Thank you for inviting me," Jack said, his voice sincere. "I never thought I'd have the chance to say this, but I'm proud of you, Emma. You've done so much more than I could have ever imagined. I'm sorry for everything I put you through." Emma smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the depth of their shared history. "I've forgiven you, Jack. I had to, for my own peace. We both took different paths, but we've found our way." They stood there for a while, sharing a quiet moment, no longer burdened by the past. Emma had built a beautiful life, and Jack had found redemption in his own way. They both understood that their paths had crossed for a reason, to teach each other invaluable lessons that shaped the people they had become. As the evening came to a close, Jack and Emma exchanged one last glance, a silent acknowledgement that their stories had ended, but that both had found peace in the endings they had created. And with that, they parted ways, knowing that their past had led them to where they were now, stronger, wiser, and ready to continue writing their own stories.